Every night, long after the courthouse lights dimmed and the echoes of powerful voices faded into silence, one man remained behind. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a judge. No one ever asked his name. He was just a janitor, a poor black man in a faded uniform, pushing a squeaky cart through marble hallways that had decided the fate of thousands. During the day, these halls were filled with authority, sharp suits, expensive shoes, confident laughter. At night, they belonged to him. Or at least, that's what people thought. He cleaned quietly. Always did. Because when you grow up being told your voice doesn't matter, you learn how to disappear. Every evening followed the same routine. Trash bins emptied, floors polished, courtrooms restored to their perfect, untouchable look, as if justice itself lived in the shine of the marble. Judges' benches were wiped spotless, microphones aligned, papers stacked neatly. The janitor knew this building better than anyone. He knew which doors creaked, which lights flickered, which judges stayed late, and which files were never supposed to move. And on this particular night, something felt wrong. The main courtroom, the one used for the most powerful cases, was supposed to be locked. It always was. But tonight, the door was slightly open, just an inch. Most people would have ignored it, but he didn't. He paused, gripping the handle of his cart, listening. Silence. No footsteps. No voices. Just a faint hum of fluorescent lights. He pushed the door open. Inside, the courtroom looked normal at first. The judge's bench stood tall, untouched. Flags rested in their corners. The air smelled faintly of paper and polish. But then he saw the desk. The judge's desk. There was a file lying on it. That alone was unusual. Judges never left files behind. Especially not overnight. Especially not in this courtroom. The janitor hesitated. He knew the rules. Don't touch anything. Don't ask questions. Don't look too closely. That's how you survive. But something about the file bothered him. Maybe it was how slightly crooked it was, or how the label had been hastily written, like someone was in a rush. He told himself he would just move it aside while cleaning. Nothing more. As he picked it up, the folder slipped slightly, just enough for a few papers inside to slide out. He bent down to gather them, and that's when he saw the name. A name everyone in the city knew. A high-profile case. One that had been on the news for weeks. A case involving money, power, and a man who was already being called guilty before the trial had even ended. The janitor's heart began to beat faster. He shouldn't read this. He knew that. But one page was already open, and one sentence caught his eye. The date didn't match. He frowned. He looked closer. Another page, same issue. A signature, slightly off. A timestamp that didn't align with the official record. Years of being ignored had trained him to observe quietly. When you're invisible, you notice things others don't. This wasn't just a mistake. This was wrong. His hands trembled as he carefully flipped through a few more pages. The deeper he looked, the clearer it became. Evidence had been altered. Not accidentally. Deliberately. Someone had changed this file to make sure the case went in only one direction. The janitor slowly closed the folder. His throat felt dry. If this was true, if this file was real, it meant an innocent person could lose everything. Or worse. And the people responsible weren't criminals hiding in the shadows. They were sitting on the bench, standing behind microphones, wearing robes and suits. People with power. People who wouldn't hesitate to silence a janitor. He placed the papers back exactly how they were. Straightened the file. Returned it to the desk as if nothing had happened. But something inside him had already changed. For the rest of the night, his movements felt heavier. The mop dragged slower. The silence felt louder. Every shadow made him uneasy. By the time he finished his shift, dawn was creeping through the courthouse windows. He stood outside for a moment, staring at the building. He had a choice. He could forget what he saw, go home, wake up the next night, and clean the same floors like nothing happened. Or he could speak. But speak to whom? Judges didn't listen to janitors. Lawyers didn't take warnings from men in worn-out shoes. And truth was dangerous when it threatened the powerful. As he walked away from the courthouse, one thought repeated in his mind. That file wasn't meant to be found, and yet somehow it found him. Unseen, unimportant, and standing directly in the path of something much bigger than himself. By the time the sun fully rose, the court would open again. People would take their seats. The judge would raise his voice, and the janitor would return to his quiet corner. But what no one knew, what no one could see, was that justice was already trembling, because the man they never noticed had seen the truth. And once truth is seen, it refuses to stay hidden. Morning arrived with noise. Car doors slammed. Shoes echoed against marble. Voices filled the courthouse again, confident, loud, unquestioned. The same building that had been silent just hours ago was alive with power. And the janitor was back. He stood near the entrance, wearing the same faded uniform, holding a mop no one noticed. To everyone else, he was part of the background. Just another worker meant to clean the mess after important people were done talking. But his eyes kept drifting toward the courtroom. The file. It was still there. He knew because he had passed by the judge's desk just moments earlier. The folder sat exactly where it had been left, neat and innocent-looking, hiding a lie that could ruin lives. The case was about to resume. People filled the seats, lawyers with polished confidence, reporters scribbling headlines before anything had even happened, families sitting stiff with fear and hope tangled together. The defendant was brought in, a man in plain clothes, hands shaking slightly, eyes scanning the room as if searching for mercy that wasn't there. The janitor recognized that look. It was the look of someone already judged. The judge entered, robe flowing, expression cold. Everyone stood, then sat. Order was called. The trial continued like a performance that had already been rehearsed. Lawyers spoke. Evidence was referenced. Dates were mentioned. The same dates the janitor knew were wrong. With every word, his chest tightened. This wasn't justice. This was a decision already made. He told himself to stay quiet, to remember his place, to survive. But then the prosecutor held up the file. That file. This document clearly proves intent, the lawyer said confidently. The timeline is undeniable. The janitor's grip tightened around the handle of his mop. Undeniable. That word echoed in his head. He looked at the defendant again. The man swallowed hard, eyes dropping to the floor. His lawyer barely objected. It was like everyone knew resistance was useless. Something inside the janitor cracked. He had spent his whole life being quiet, watching wrong things happen because speaking came with consequences he couldn't afford. But this felt heavier. He took a step forward. The sound of his shoe against the marble floor echoed louder than he expected. Heads turned. A few people frowned. The judge paused mid-sentence and looked down. Yes, the judge said sharply. What is it? The janitor froze. His heart hammered in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to step back, to apologize, to disappear. But his mouth opened anyway. Your Honor, he said quietly, his voice rough from disuse. That file, there's something wrong with it. A beat of silence. Then laughter. Not loud laughter. Worse. Polite chuckles. Smirks. The kind of laughter that says you don't belong here. The judge's expression hardened. Who allowed you to speak? He snapped. You are interrupting a court proceeding. The janitor tried. Enough, the judge said, raising his voice. You are a janitor. Do your job and stay in your place. The words landed like a slap. Heat rushed to the janitor's face. Every eye in the room was on him now. Not with curiosity, but annoyance. Security shifted closer. Someone whispered, "Unbelievable." The prosecutor shook his head, amused. Your Honor, perhaps we should remove him. The janitor felt small. Smaller than he had felt in years. This was the moment people like him learned their lesson. And yet, he didn't move. Instead, he looked at the judge. Not with anger. With calm. With respect, he said, voice steadier now. I clean this courtroom every night. I don't read files. I don't touch them. But last night, that one was left out. And the dates inside don't match the court record. The laughter stopped. Just slightly. The judge narrowed his eyes. That's absurd, he said. You expect this court to believe a janitor understands legal documents? I don't understand law, the janitor replied. But I understand numbers. And I understand when something's been changed. A murmur rippled through the room. The judge slammed his gavel. Silence. He leaned forward, anger flashing across his face. "You are dangerously close to contempt of court," he warned. "One more word, and you will be escorted out." The janitor swallowed. This was it, the line he was never meant to cross. He glanced at the defendant one last time. The man was staring at him now, really staring, as if clinging to the last thread of hope. The janitor took a breath. One more word, the judge had said, so he chose it carefully. "Page 17, the janitor said calmly. The timestamp was altered. You can compare it to the digital log. The room went completely still. No laughter, no whispers, no movement. The judge didn't speak. For the first time since the trial began, he hesitated. And in that hesitation, something shifted. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a janitor speaking. It was the truth knocking on the door. And everyone in that courtroom felt it. The silence after the janitor's words felt heavier than shouting. Page 17. The judge stared at him, eyes sharp, jaw clenched. For a brief moment, it looked like the gavel might come down again. Harder, louder, ending everything. Instead, the judge leaned back. "Remove him," the prosecutor said quickly, trying to regain control. "This is ridiculous." But the judge didn't move. His fingers tapped slowly against the bench. Page 17. He repeated, not looking at the janitor, but at the file. A court clerk stepped forward nervously. The judge nodded once. "Bring me the document." The janitor's knees felt weak as the file was taken from the desk and placed in front of the judge. Every step the clerk took felt like a countdown. The courtroom leaned forward. The judge flipped through the pages with practice speed. Page 15, 16, then page 17. His eyes paused, just for a second, but it was enough. The judge's expression changed, not to anger, but something far more dangerous. Concern. He leaned closer, reading the timestamp aloud. Then he glanced toward the clerk. "Pull the digital log," he said quietly. The prosecutor stiffened. "Your Honor," he said, forcing a smile, "this isn't necessary. The evidence has already been reviewed." The judge didn't look at him. "Now." The clerk's fingers flew across the keyboard. Screens flickered. Numbers appeared. The janitor stood frozen, heart pounding so loudly he was sure others could hear it. He hadn't planned this far. He hadn't imagined they would actually check. He had only known one thing. Something was wrong. The clerk cleared her throat. "Your Honor," she said, voice shaky. "The digital log doesn't match the printed timestamp." A ripple of unease swept through the room. The defense attorney sat up straighter. Reporters stopped writing. The prosecutor laughed, too loudly. "Technical glitch," he said. "These systems aren't perfect." The judge finally looked at him. "Are you saying the court system is wrong?" The judge asked. "No, well, Then explain why this timestamp shows a revision at 11:42 p.m., the judge continued, when this evidence was supposedly locked at 9 o'clock. The prosecutor's mouth opened, then closed. The janitor watched his confidence drain from the man's face. The same confidence that had filled the room just minutes ago. The judge turned to the clerk again. "Who accessed the file last night?" The clerk hesitated. I need authorization to pull that information." "You have it." The room held its breath. Seconds stretched. Finally, the clerk spoke. "There were 2 accesses," she said. "One by the evidence department earlier in the day, and one after hours." The judge's voice was low. "Name." The clerk swallowed. "It was accessed from the internal network," she said. "Judge-level credentials." A murmur turned into whispers. Judge-level. That meant only a handful of people. The judge's jaw tightened. "Which judge?" The clerk looked down. I can't say without." "Say it." The clerk's voice was barely above a whisper. It was logged under Judge Hallbrook's credentials. A sharp inhale swept through the courtroom. Judge Hallbrook, the same judge who had overseen key portions of the case. The same judge who wasn't present in the room. The prosecutor slammed his hand on the table. "This is outrageous," he snapped. "You're going to derail a trial based on the word of a janitor and a computer error?" The judge rose slowly from his seat. His voice carried authority that silenced everyone. "This court does not decide guilt based on convenience," he said. "If evidence has been altered, intentionally or otherwise, This entire case is compromised. He looked directly at the janitor. For the record, the judge said, "State your name." The janitor hesitated. No one had asked him that before. "Marcus," he said softly. "Marcus Reed." The judge nodded once. "Mr. Reed," he said, "how did you come across this file?" Marcus explained, briefly, carefully. "Cleaning. Open door. File left behind. No embellishment. Just facts." The judge listened. So did everyone else. When Marcus finished, the judge turned to the bailiff. "Secure this courtroom," he ordered. "No one leaves." Gasps filled the air. The defendant's eyes widened. Hope flickered for the first time. The prosecutor's face was pale now. The judge continued. "I'm calling for an immediate internal review," he said. "All evidence related to this case will be frozen. Judge Hallbrook is to be notified and placed on administrative leave pending investigation." The words hit like thunder. A judge, under investigation. And it had all started because a janitor noticed a detail no one else did. Marcus felt dizzy. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't wanted attention. He had just wanted the truth to be seen. As officers moved and phones buzzed with breaking news alerts, Marcus slowly stepped back, unsure where he belonged now. Then the judge spoke again. "Mr. Reed," he said. Marcus looked up. "You did the right thing." Those words landed heavier than any gavel. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt seen. But outside the courtroom, forces far more powerful than one judge were already moving. And by morning, everything would change. By the time the courthouse doors closed, the story was already spreading. Phones buzzed nonstop. Headlines formed before facts could catch up. Evidence tampered. Judge under investigation. Janitor exposes courtroom scandal. Marcus Reed sat alone in a small, windowless office near the back of the building. Someone had offered him water. Someone else had told him to wait. No one explained what would happen next. His hands still trembled. He kept replaying the judge's words in his head. "You did the right thing." But doing the right thing had never felt this dangerous. Through the thin walls, he could hear raised voices. Lawyers arguing. Administrators panicking. People who had never noticed him before were suddenly speaking his name in sharp, urgent tones. Not with respect, with fear. A courthouse official finally entered the room. He was polite, but distant, like someone standing too close to a fire. "Mr. Reed," he said, avoiding eye contact, "you're being placed on paid leave until this matter is resolved." Paid leave. Marcus almost laughed. He nodded quietly. As the man turned to leave, Marcus spoke. "Am I in trouble?" The official paused. "That depends," he said slowly, "on how much more you know." The door closed. The silence returned, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. Across town, powerful conversations were happening behind closed doors. Calls were made. Favors were reminded. Pressure built quickly when the system felt threatened. By evening, reporters gathered outside the courthouse. Cameras pointed at doors Marcus had cleaned 1,000 times without anyone caring. Inside, investigators pored over files. Not just one case, but others. Patterns emerged. Small changes. Quiet revisions. Decisions that always leaned one way. Marcus was asked to give a statement. Then another. Each time, he stuck to the truth. He described the file. The timestamp. The open door. Nothing more. But the questions changed. Did anyone tell you to look at the file? Are you affiliated with the defense? Do you understand how serious your accusations are? He answered calmly. No. No. Yes. The night grew heavy. When Marcus finally stepped outside, the air felt different. Cameras turned instantly. Reporters shouted questions. "Marcus, did you know you were exposing corruption? Are you afraid for your safety? Do you think the judge targeted you because of your race?" He didn't answer. He walked past them slowly, head down, heart racing. At home, he locked the door behind him. Then he noticed something. A piece of paper slid halfway under his door. No knock. No name. Just a note. "This ends badly for people who don't know their place." His hands went cold. For the first time since everything began, fear outweighed pride. He sat on his couch in the dark, listening to every sound outside. Cars passing. Footsteps. A distant siren. Was this worth it? He thought of the defendant's face. The way hope had flickered in his eyes. He thought of all the nights he had cleaned that courtroom, believing justice lived there. Sleep didn't come easily. At dawn, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Mr. Reed," a woman said. Her voice was calm, professional. "My name is Angela Brooks. I'm with the Internal Judicial Review Board." Marcus straightened. "We need you to come in," she said. Immediately, at the courthouse, things looked different. Security was tighter. Officials moved carefully. Some avoided Marcus's eyes. Others stared openly. In a conference room, Angela Brooks sat across from him. Her expression was serious, but not unkind. "What you uncovered," she said, "was not an isolated incident." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies, screenshots, logs. "Your observation opened a door," she continued. "And once we stepped through it, we found more." Marcus felt his breath catch. "How many cases?" he asked. Angela exhaled, enough to shake public trust. She leaned forward. "But understand this, there will be resistance. People will try to discredit you, intimidate you, make this about anything other than the truth." Marcus thought of the note. "I know," he said quietly. Angela nodded. "By speaking up, you became a witness," she said. "And that makes you both important and vulnerable." Outside the room, the courthouse buzzed with controlled chaos. By mid-morning, news broke again. Judge Holbrook suspended. Multiple cases under review. Janitor's discovery sparks statewide investigation. The defendant's case was officially halted. For the first time in weeks, a man who had nearly lost everything was granted relief. And Marcus? Marcus sat alone once more. But this time, the silence wasn't ignoring him. It was watching, because now the system had to decide something it never wanted to face. What happens when the truth comes from the man who cleans the floor? And whether they liked it or not. By morning, justice would demand an answer. Morning arrived quietly. No sirens, no shouting, just sunlight pouring through courthouse windows that had witnessed too many secrets. But inside, everything was different. Marcus Reed stood near the entrance, not holding a mop this time, but a folder given to him by the review board. People noticed him now, not all with kindness, but with awareness. The trial that once felt untouchable was officially dismissed. The defendant was released pending a full reinvestigation. When a man walked out of the courtroom, free for the first time in weeks, his eyes found Marcus across the hall. He didn't speak. He just nodded. And in that nod was gratitude deeper than words. By mid-morning, the news was everywhere. Judges suspended. Evidence audits launched. Cases reopened. What began as a single altered timestamp had unraveled years of quiet manipulation. Files were reviewed line by line. Digital trails exposed patterns no one wanted to admit existed. And for the first time, the system couldn't pretend it didn't see. Marcus was called into another meeting. This time, the room felt different. No intimidation, no raised voices, just seriousness. Angela Brooks sat across from him again. Beside her were officials Marcus had only ever seen from a distance. "Mr. Reed," one of them said, clearing his throat, "we owe you an apology." Marcus blinked. "For dismissing you," the man continued. "For not listening. And for creating a system where someone like you felt afraid to speak." The words felt heavy. Marcus didn't respond right away. "I didn't do this to be brave," he said finally. "I just didn't want someone to lose their life because the truth was inconvenient." The room fell silent. That afternoon, Judge Holbrook officially resigned. No speech, no defense, just a name removed from the door. Outside, protesters gathered, not in anger, but in demand. Demand for fairness, demand for accountability, demand that justice stop, depending on who was considered important. Marcus watched from a distance. For years, he had cleaned the steps they now stood on. A reporter approached him later, microphone in hand. "Marcus," she asked gently, "how does it feel to change the system?" He shook his head. "I didn't change it," he said. "I just showed what was already broken." That evening, Marcus returned home. No threats this time. No notes. Just quiet. He sat by his window, watching the sun set, thinking about how close he had come to staying silent. How easy it would have been to walk away, and how heavy that choice would have been. Days passed, then weeks. The investigation widened. New safeguards were announced. Oversight committees were formed. For once, change didn't fade with the headlines. Marcus was offered a new position, not as a janitor, as a facilities compliance officer, someone who ensured records, access, and procedures followed strict rules. He almost declined, but then he remembered something Angela had told him. Change only lasts when people who see the truth stay close to it. On his first day in the new role, Marcus walked through the same hallways. The marbles still shined. The doors still creaked. But something was different. People greeted him by name. As he passed the courtroom where it all began, he paused. The judge's desk was empty. The file was gone, and for the first time, the room felt honest. Marcus rested his hand briefly on the doorway. He thought about all the people who had walked past him for years without seeing him, about how close injustice came to winning, and how fragile truth can be unless someone chooses to hold it. As he walked away, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Because of you, my father came home. Thank you." Marcus stared at the screen. Then he smiled, not because he had power, but because he had used the little he had. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with a badge or a title. Sometimes it arrives with a mop in hand. And sometimes, the person everyone ignores is the one who saves the truth.